What's up, MMA fans? I am being joined by a special guest today, one of the most legendary advisors and event promoters in combat sports, from working with fighters like Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier to being the UFC Site Coordinator, also known as the babysitter to the stars, the one, the only, Burt Watson. Burt, how you doing? How is it over there in Philadelphia?
Man, I'm trying to make it, baby, and everything is lovely. Everything's good. Today's a little dreary. It's getting ready to rain outside, but
I know, on New Year's.
but that it's
Good luck.
New Year. Okay, we getting ready to get the other one out of here, so it's all good. And everything's good.
So you're staying safe over there, kind of just keeping things close family for New Year's, or any plans?
100 safe family, and luckily I'm at a point now in my life where I have grandchildren. So, and my kids are gone. So my oldest grandchild is 26. So, and then I got them, I think the youngest is like 13 or so, but they're so the only person here is me and Mama Burt. That's the only people that we got to take care of. And we just stay in and be safe and stay healthy and just kind of listen to what we know is the truth. And then, it works.
And that's awesome. Obviously, you probably had, so many fun New Year's all over the world. You were on your website, it says you were a personal friend to Joe Frazier before you became his a manager role. But
Yes.
Wasn't the Philadelphia connection? Because I know he's from Philadelphia. Is that how you guys originally met?
Yeah. Well, it's a Philadelphia connection. And ironically, baby, Joe and I were born one town across from each other in the same little, in Charleston, South Carolina, is in that area where Joe was born. And we ended up moving to Philadelphia, our families, but not knowing each other. And I had 2 chance meetings with Joe Frazier. And I was after I got out, I did some time in the Marine Corps, not time and time. I did some time in the Marine Corps, and I got out and moved to Manhattan. And believe it or not, I initially started in fashion. I went to FIT and Mayor School of Fashion Design. That's where I was going to be making patterns and grading and yada yada. And I'm walking down the street one day. There's a car accident. Everybody stops and everybody gets out of the car, and who gets out of one of the cars is Joe Frazier. And you do a double take, and you're like, So me being the chatty person that I am, I went over and I spoke to him because he couldn't move because the traffic couldn't move, and we spoke. And I didn't expect the type of response that I was going to get from him, because now I'm going to date myself and tell you how old I am. We're talking about, he had a fight in a few weeks, March 8th, 1971. Okay. So, he was in New York, and we talked and exchanged numbers, but I was nowhere near this type of sporting event, or even here. And, one thing led, years went by, we kept touch. I'm originally from Philadelphia. My parents are in Philadelphia. So when I was done with New York, I moved back to Philadelphia. I got back into Philadelphia, my niece got married. My mom's friend decided to give my niece a present, a limousine service for the bride to ride to her wedding. So she did that, she ordered it, and long story short, I'm in the house, the limousine driver pulls up, my nephew says, "Hey man, the limousine," no, he didn't say, "Hey man," he said, "Uncle Burt." "Hey Uncle Burt, there's a limo out there, and the guy wants to park the car and he needs to go up the street." I said, "No, you tell him to stay there." I said, "No, you know what? I'll go tell him." True story, baby. I walked outside, I knocked on the window, guy rolled down the window, it was Smokin Joe Frazier.
Oh my gosh.
Driving, Joe had a limousine service in Philly. Now, Joe Frazier was a very plain Joe. He was a very low-key, typical guy. Even though he was probably one of the 2 biggest names in the history of the sport, he was just an average Joe. So he had a limousine service, and it worked out of the gym. When he came into the gym, back in the day, we had clipboards. We didn't use computers and stuff. We had clipboard. He picked up the clipboard, saw that there was a job, and that the driver wasn't there. Joe Frazier put that clipboard down and got in that car and drove it. Drove up to my mom's house because he was going to drive. He was going to not let anybody mess up his business. I rolled down the window and bam!
Wow.
There he was, looking at me, and I'm like, whoa.
And so you guys immediately recognize.
Well, because we had been communicating, but not as much because there weren't really cell phones back in those days. And then when they got cell phones, they were this big. They were like car batteries.
Got them on your back.
Yeah. I'm telling you, phones were as big as a boombox. But you know, my generation and his generation, when we told you we're gonna be someplace at 2:00 on Tuesday, we were there at 1:59. Okay, so one thing led to another, and then we said, oh man, we reconnected and we started hanging out, and we started going out, and he started taking me out with him, and his sons were fighting, and I was put into a fast-paced world, even though I came from fashion, which was already fast-paced, but I was put into a faster pace. And we started hanging out and going out and hanging out. And one day, it finally, because I was not a drinker per se, finally one day I had to say to him, you know what, Joe, you got to do one or two things. You're going to either have to give me a job or leave me the hell alone, because I can't handle this pace. So he gave me a job. And that's how it happened. I came on, and it was just before he had his last fight in 1981 with Jumbo Cummins. But at the time, he had his son, Marvis, who fought Tyson. He had Joe Jr., he had a gym. He had a lot of things going on. Joe had, even when he stopped fighting, he had 7 Fraziers fighting, and all related. So, I went in without any experience or knowledge. He dropped me in that seat, and I became his manager. And the rest of it just kept on rolling, baby.
So when did you make the transition from boxing more into mixed martial arts?
I did. I coordinated boxing events. Once I got with Joe, I met everybody. I met Queen Elizabeth. I met Nelson Mandela, Mickey Rourke. There is not a person you could think of that I didn't meet with Joe Frazier, and I was fanboying myself to death. But then, as I said, he also had 7 other Fraziers that were fighting. So he wanted to do his own promotion. So he said to me, listen, man, he said, I'm going to just do my own promotion. And I said, okay, go ahead. He said, yeah, here you go. So I had to do the promotion. That was the groundwork for me becoming a coordinator and a consultant, because I had to put all that stuff together from scratch, having no idea what I was doing. So I did it. And we started promoting, and because he was Joe Frazier, we had no problem getting on ABC with Tyrone Frazier, but of course the guys needed to be able to fight. We got on ESPN, USA Boxing, and I got to bounce around. And then I got to meet Don King and Lou Duva, and Bob Arum and all these guys, and they saw me promoting, so they asked me to promote or help them, which I did. And I went through boxing, and I became a coordinator in boxing. The only person, and I can cut that just to here, the only person that I have not had any experience working with in boxing is Lennox Lewis. Anybody else, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Hector Camacho, Chavez, De La Hoya, I did Tyson's last fight. Anyone you could name, I've worked with in my career as a coordinator. So I did a show in Vegas. Right after I did Arturo Gatti and De La Hoya, I did another show, Costa Zoot and Zab Judah. And the promoter The guy brought me on, everybody, because they were passing me around. They, everybody was just passing me around, but that was a good thing because I was rolling. And I did a show, and this promoter came to me and said, listen, man, I got this guy who's looking for somebody because he's going to do a show. He needs good people, and I told him about you. So I'm going to bring him in, and this was at the weigh-in. And I was like, look, man, I got to get this weigh-in done. I'll meet this guy real quick, but I can't split the time like that. And he respected that. So he brought him in after the weigh-in, brought the guy into the room and introduced him. He said, hey, this is Burt Watson, and this is the guy you need to do. And the guy he brought in was Dana White. And, first time I'd ever seen Dana White. Dana White was thinner than me, had hair on his head, and we shook hands. And he started telling me about what he was doing. Now, I had never, ever done mixed martial arts. I knew nothing about wrestling or grappling or, I knew Bruce Lee and Bruce Leroy. I didn't know nothing else about that stuff, nothing. But he said, I'm going to do a show and I'm going to need somebody. And they told me, you're the guy. And I said to him, I said, you know what? You pay me and respect me, you got it. Plain and simple.
Wow. Was there ever a moment in that process with working in the MMA where you were like, wow, this is going to be the next big thing? Or had it already been kind of on that path?
I saw that. The first show I did for them was the first show they did was UFC 30. That was the first show I did. And by the time I got up to UFC 34, where Matt Newton slammed Carlos Newton, that infamous knocked out, and both of them were knocked out and stuff, I could see then, I could see it had legs. But let me tell you what really did it for me. Like I told you, I came from boxing. De La Hoya, Tyson, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran. In boxing, Holyfield, professional boxing at the time, a star as big as Mike Tyson, if you were not in his circle and he had a fight, you couldn't touch it. You couldn't get around him. Fans couldn't get it. There was a time I was the coordinator and some of his guys didn't know who I was. They wasn't gonna let me in. Of course I can go a little bit, so I had to stand up, but they weren't gonna let me in. So I'm saying that to say that that's the way they did with the fighters. You never got near a star, which is probably still the same way in Hollywood. If you walked out now and you saw Beyonce or whoever you like, you probably can't get close to them unless somebody let you. Well, when I went to MMA with Dana, a couple of the first fights I ever saw or ever did, I did Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, with Matt Hughes and BJ Penn and Jens Pulver on the undercard. Not one of those guys. When those guys came to see the fighters, I just let them see the fighters. And Dana said, that's fine. Let them do it. So the fans were ingratiated with the fighters. They were never not allowed to touch the fighter or get to the fighter. A fighter would come and check in and walk out, swoom, fans on him with the autographs and all that. Right away in my head, I said, you know what? This thing's got legs. Because if the fans can get to you, they're gonna stick with you. That was the first thing. And if anybody ever asks you, and I didn't read that shit in the book, baby, okay? That's how it started to get to a point where I saw it had legs. And the more these guys reached out and touched the fan, and the more autographs they signed, the bigger the crowd gets. The next thing I know, I was signing an autograph. I was like, hey, where's your mom? Let me sign. Hey, you got a dog? But as simplistic as that may sound, I knew what that meant because I came from boxing.
Such a loyal fan base.
So, and I'm going to tell you, I would do, and the first year or two, I did both. Because one thing Dana never did, and I respected him, but I also never let anybody else do it. Never tell me how to do my job. You give me a job, get it out of the way, and when I get to the end of it, there's a paycheck. And if you're not happy with what I did by the time I got to the end of it, then you can take that paycheck back, you know. So never told me what to do, but I saw it when I went back to boxing. I could see the same thing going on, you know, because I think the first thing I went back to Klitschko. I don't know how much you are with boxing, but I did both the Klitschko brothers, but I could see then how it was still no fans, nobody could get near. Then I went back to MMA again. The 3 weeks later, it was totally different. The fans were all over it. And I'm gonna tell you something, they never forgot. You'd go to a boxing event and you get a bout sheet. I don't know if they still give them out or not, okay? A bout sheet tells you who's on the card and who's fighting. And it gives you from top to bottom in the bout order. You used to go to a boxing match and you get a bout sheet that had 10 fights on it. The only people that the fans knew was the main event and the co-main. The other 8 people, other 8 fights, my very first, maybe second UFC, they gave me a bout sheet, which we had and I made up, and I had a little to do with putting that bout sheet together. Those fans knew every fighter on that card. They knew his grandmama's name. They knew what kind of cat he liked. They knew the last time he got his butt whooped. I'm like, whoa. So right away, with that alone, I knew then, you know what? This thing has got legs. And when it catches on, and it did.
And before we transition completely into all MMA talk, Muhammad Ali's birthday is coming up January 17th.
January 17th.
January 12th for Joe Frazier.
Joe Frazier. George Foreman is the 20th.
Yes, we got a lot of January birthdays. When's your birthday?
And Floyd Patterson's January 5th. So
wow.
You got 5 champions in January. Mine's July 17th, baby.
We're going to be celebrating coming up in these next 2 months. But I know you said you met Joe Frazier in 1970. There was obviously a lot of social turmoil going on with the civil rights movement. When you're thinking back to the stance that Muhammad Ali had and then where we are today, do you think he would be super proud that it has been a resurgence in that movement, maybe because of social media and things can spread faster with the news of George Floyd?
Well, I think I'm getting ready to get into trouble with what I'm about to say. And I am a product of that era and that age, and people like Muhammad Ali, you know, his voice and the way he magnified his voice. But, you know, he was a sarcastic guy, but when it came to social unrest and social justice, he was serious and he was real about it. And he was one of the leaders. And at the time, we had quite a few leaders, you know, Dr. King, and we had them. I am so proud today to see the response of your generation, you know, without thinking, you know, just getting out there and doing what we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to do this, and we're not going to stand this. I would just like to see a few more leaders out there so that when things slow down, they still keep the momentum and they still keep the verbiage going and they still keep the word going and not wait until something else comes up for them to get back together and rally. I'm hoping, and I know there are a few, like the group that started the Black Lives Matter and a couple of others, but I'd like to see the consistency of that so that when it, like right now it's at a low, it's kind of low down a little bit, yeah. You know, but it's still there, you know, and I don't want to see like right now, people not wanting to take the vaccine take the place of what that meant. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely being more proactive versus reactive to when there's
Yes,
a different tragedy or something like that. But yeah, I just want to get your point on that because you've seen so much of the evolution, not only in the fight world, but also with social movements. So I know you have a lot of knowledge and probably many, many stories to
heartfelt.
So as someone that's seen the evolution from, the very beginning of Zuffa days and worked in the boxing department like you, what would be your advice for someone that's looking to get into work with either the UFC or boxing and like as an event coordinator, even someone to put on like their own promotions? What have you learned?
Well, first of all, it's consistency. You gotta be consistent with what you do. You gotta have some semblance of organization. You gotta some semblance of somebody's going to give you a room full of junk and going to tell you to make it look like an office. You got to have some concept of how to do that, and when you do and you do it, you got to make it your own, and you got to listen to yourself, and then you get people to get a comfort level with you. Everybody has to have a comfort level with you in order to have you do anything for them. They got to have that comfort level, and also the comfort level to know that they can give you something and not get it back broken. But for someone who has aspirations of getting in, you got to look, listen, learn organizational skills, and listen to everything everybody says. There's nothing anybody says to me that doesn't make sense, ever. There's nothing anybody ever says to me that I don't listen to. Because if they said it to me, they want me to hear it, and I need to know it the next time I see them. And that's a guideline. It helps you, and everything. It's like what I do. Fighters come in during the course of the week. I got to get them. I put them on the scale. I check their weight. I make sure the weight's right. I got to do their workout rooms. I got to make sure the workout room's a certain temperature. There's certain things in there, yada, yada, yada. I got to do the dressing rooms. I got to do, but at the same time, baby, I have to listen to them because fighters and athletes are different breeds. There are guys that may not like the way a guy dressed, but he won't say anything to him. There are guys might not like the way a guy work out or the way a guy smells or what, may not say nothing to him, but he won't go in the workout room with him. But I have to be the person to listen to everything everybody says. But if I hear one guy over here say, even in a secret, in jest, oh man, when I go to put the workout rooms together, I have to put guys in that workout room that are going to stay in that workout room, that are going to be able to work out together. And that's because I listen. And the most important part of it is fight night. Can you imagine fight night, guys coming downstairs to a dressing room and somebody's in there they don't like? And you got to make that you got to make that change and switch that dressing room. Never had that happen because I listened and I made a point to listen and look. And it's more looking and visualizing than anything, because if you can see it, you can put it together.
Wow, well, that's some crucial advice right there, Burt. I want to thank you so much for giving me the time of day.
Come on, baby.
Any shout out? I know you're wearing your Burt Watson promotions. Any plans for the future that you want people to know about?
Well, right now I've got a series coming out the first of the year on MMA Junkie. It's called Legends to Legends, and it's a podcast, a series, and it's where I sit down with a true legend and we talk about career, family, life, and things you might not know about, and things he and I know about because I've worked with all of them. So I've got one coming. I've already done one with Randy Couture, which is up on MMA Junkie. It's up there already. But starting with the new year, we're going to break out with the new year with Randy and my man who I saw you with, Hoyce. Hey, come on, I watch my business. Voice. I got a special one coming with Matt Hughes. You know, after that horrific accident he had in 2017, but I got him sitting down, Burt style, a little OG chatter. You know, so it's called Legends to Legends, and it'll be on MMA Junkie. And I love people to interact with me on social media. If I see a message or I see your name, I'm gonna come at you. If I get something on my social media, and I think you can attest to that, I'm gonna answer it, and I'm gonna come back. So I'm on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram under Burt Watson for real.
Real.